Welcome back to the Tongue of the Trees channel. I'm Elizabeth Ashley, the Secret Healer. We're talking about what is rose essential oil good for, and apologies for the state of the shed. It's got a lot to do with kind of what I'm talking about today, really, which is the emotional aspects of rose medicine, but from a slightly different angle, because everybody always goes in from the angle of depression and grief, and I have always gone it that way, and I've done it to death. So I've had cause to really think about Venus medicine a lot while I've been researching the Melissa. So I thought I would talk about it from that angle and see where we go from there. So where do we start? There's kind of two main myths when we talk about Aphrodite. Well, three, because the first one is how she was born from the water fully formed. You know that picture of Botticelli's Venus. The story says that Rhea was so sick of being pregnant all of the time by Uranus that she sent her son Cronus to hack off her husband's genitals. They fell into the water, and from the water, from the foaming gory mess, came Aphrodite. And so that's the main one. But we should be aware that from that not only is she totally inextricably linked with water, from blood, and we'll talk about blood in a minute, but also sexuality. You know, she is born from the penis. We all are, but that's really graphic, isn't it? So that's the first thing. The next most interesting myth I talk about a lot in the Melissa book. It's about how she came to be in a relationship with Adonis. So this is interesting because whenever I talk about rose, I have this relationship in my head with myrrh. Rose and myrrh is just beautiful. Both uterine tonics, remember? Very interesting. And the story of myrrh is fascinating too. Myrrh was a nymph, and she had been turned into a tree. No, that's wrong. Let's go back. So her mother had said to Aphrodite that Myrrh was far more beautiful than Aphrodite. Or another story says that Myrrh wouldn't worship Aphrodite. Either way, Aphrodite cursed her. And she said that from ever now, you will be in love with your father. And poor old Myrrh, that is exactly what happened. She became besotted by her father. And by, she copulated with her father in the dark for 9 days. Then eventually her father worked out who she was, and he chased her off with a sword. And she ran and ran and ran and ran, and she ran right across Arabia. And she pleaded with the gods to help her. What could she do? So her father was still chasing her, so the gods did the only thing they could do, and they turned her into a myrrh tree. And yeah, then she birthed Adonis. So we have this idea that Adonis is born of the myrrh tree. So that's interesting. Obviously, as a tree, she's not the greatest mother. By and by, Aphrodite comes by one day and she sees the child and she thinks, oh my goodness, that is such a beautiful child. And in my head, I can kind of see the cherubic nature, a bit like her other child, who was, or her child, Eros. But she's just besotted by this little baby. And so she decides, well, there's nobody about, then I shall get somebody to raise her. Oddly, she decides she's going to ask Persephone to raise her, considering that Persephone is the queen of the underworld and missing for 4 months a year. That's a weird decision in my mind, but she does. And so Adonis goes to the underworld and she raises him, and the child is beautiful and the teenager is just delicious, and the man is the most beautiful thing anybody's ever seen. And of course Aphrodite then takes one look and goes, she's got to have him. And so they argue and they have this big fight and they bicker, and then eventually Zeus has to intercede, as he always ends up interceding, and says, right, I'm going to decide this. He will stay 4 months with Persephone in the underworld. He'll stay 4 months with you, Aphrodite, and then he's got 4 months to work out what he wants to do himself. So this works quite well, and Adonis starts to decide, actually, I really want to be with Aphrodite. And then we see the strange narrative start to change, because Aphrodite goes from being this powerful queen to a bit, you know, she's a bit flaky. Really, you know how your friends get when they fell in love and they're just never about anymore, and they're just disappearing all the time, and they're just a bit, oh, so he's so lovely, she can't think about anything else to say, so she doesn't, and she's just like, I just want to be with him all the time. So Adonis, the beautiful creature that he is, always wants to be in the forest. So she's always hunting with him, and she warns him. She says, you know, this is dangerous. I don't like you doing it all of the time. And potentially she's trying to get him to stay at home with her anyway, I guess. But he's like, no, I like doing my hunting. And he's a bit about himself. And eventually a boar comes out of the woods, and it runs straight into Adonis. He doesn't see it coming, and he impales him on his horn. And so Adonis is dead, and he falls to the floor, and the myth either says that Aphrodite falls to the floor and she cries on the floor, and her tears meld with his blood, and they are transformed into, in one story it says an anemone. In another story, it says a white rose, and she turns the white rose red. And we're starting to see how the pink rose and the white rose and the red rose suddenly become so wound up with the myth. And now, interestingly, if you go back to Babylonian medicine, there is a similar one about... Sorry about that. It appears I need a new SIM card. Cut me off in my prime. So this myth also exists in Babylonian culture and also in the Old Testament, oddly. So this is a profoundly interesting myth, and it brings together lots of elements about the journey of the goddess. What we would call the Syrian goddess, really. So starting off with kind of Cybele, then kind of going off towards Inanna, Ishtar, Astarte, Aphrodite, Ashtoreth, Venus, that branch. You see this myth coming up over and over again. So this boar is also an interesting thing, because some myths say that Persephone sent the boar to kill Adonis so that she could have him back in the underworld. Some say that it was Artemis who sent the boar because of something to do with Hippolytus, something to do with Aphrodite, some slight, can't remember exactly. And some say that Ares sent the boar because he was jealous of Aphrodite's attentions. And we'll talk about Aries in a minute. But some say that the boar itself was Aries. So that's interesting. So the myth of Aries is also interesting because there's this lifelong, passionate love between Aries and Aphrodite. Aphrodite's supposed to be married to Hephaestus, the blacksmith, who is not a pretty fellow, whereas Aries really is, and she's quite besotted, and they cannot be kept apart. There's a long myth, which I'm not going to go into. But so this boar could also be Aries, they say. So Aries, of course, if we put him into the Roman pantheon, is Mars. And this idea of Venus tempers Mars goes right the way through medical astrology. If there's a problem with Mars, then Venus can put it right. But also, what we never talk about is there is a time when she's got that full sort of Venus retrograde aspect where she's just missing. She's missing from view, probably in the forest with Adonis hunting. But we feel that, you know, there's times where we kind of just the Venus in our psyche disappears. We sort of withdraw from life, and sometimes that can be an astrological transit. You know, Venus retrograde, you feel it. Venus is money, it's beautiful, it's beauty, it's love. When it's retrograding, they feel like they're missing, you know. But also there can just be times where you've been doing, particularly for me, a lot of spiritual work where I've been absolutely exhausted and I just haven't been able to interact with the outside world. This is kind of a spiritual Venus retrograde, that love has gone, that the joy from life has gone, that we feel confused and bewildered, and we can say grief, we can say depression, we can just say, you know, those times where it's inexplicably wrong. Just wrong, things feel confused. So a good example of that is a lot of the medicine in the actually both books. The Melissa book will have a lot of writing about dementia, but as does the Rose book, to do with memory. You know, Rose is extraordinarily good for memory, but we have those times where we kind of are nostalgic. It's a very romantic and nostalgic oil, of course. You know, we soon as we see roses, we think of romantic love, don't we? That feeling of being nostalgic, of melancholy, thinking about what has gone past, or in cases of dementia, what kind of flicking forward, confused, the timeline has gone. And that is a feeling of Venus retrograde. That 40, it's kind of, I can't remember exactly how many days it is, maybe 32 the retrograde is, I think. Can't remember exactly, should have looked that up. But then you have a period either side, so it works out that you feel weird for 40 days, and if you measure it, you do. You can say from the moment that hit to the moment I came out the other side is 40 days. And interestingly, that kind of ties in with Jesus's 40 days in the wilderness, you know, this kind of shamanic, strange relationship between 40 days. Confusion, depression, withdrawal, all of those things would be Rose, and particularly confusion. Yeah, in things like, you know, when your reality gets shifted. So maybe that's grief. So you know, your partner dies, you're divorced, you're being betrayed, or PTSD, or, well, you know what? We've all gone through a time where our reality's shifted at the moment, hasn't it? All the rules no longer apply. And for a lot of people, that's been very challenging. So Rose is extremely helpful in those kind of situations, reduces the anxiety, reduces the depression. So that is Venus retrograde. What is rose essential oil good for? I'm going to run through a quick layout for you to show you the different cards. Now, one of the things that we're not going to tell you in this video, in these videos, is the poem that goes with the cards. But for this layout, we will read them to you just so that you get a chance to sort of feel how the different poems look. So I thought I'd show you the cards. As you can see, lovely little box. I'll show you the other side. Boring stuff, except for cool stuff what I read. Okay, so if we open it up, we can see that the cards just have one logo on, and that is because these originally were Gegle's cards. He's been selling these for a long time in Hungary. Mostly they've been bought by kinesiologists, interestingly enough. They've been doing the energy work with them. They haven't got any aromatherapy background, but they've been able to tap into the energetics of the oils to be able to move emotional blockages. So let's show you. So these come out nice and easy because we've got beautiful little ribbons. And let's get rid of that. So if I said to the cards, what energy do I need? What oils will help me do the best job with these videos? Let's have a... Now, my friend Belinda used these the other day, and she does have a habit of shuffling them the wrong way. So we'll have to hope that they're all the way right up. I'm not doing a good job of keeping them that way. So let's have a look. What do I need to do a great job? So I think, it's up to you how you do it, but I think cut it 3 ways, cut it back. Yeah, I'm happy with that. So first 3 cards off the top. Cedarwood Virginian. I'll tell you why I'm laughing at that in a minute. Rose and lavender. That's a beautiful blend, isn't it? Reason why I was laughing about a Cedarwood Virginian is when Gegle and I came to do the notes of all the different cards, we both went, oh, we've done these cards for Cedarwood Virginian and I don't really know how to explain them differently. And because I was doing lots of editing work, I went, oh, just leave it. So yesterday I did a meditation with Cedarwood Virginian and got the most beautiful, beautiful work out of it. So you must tap into that tomorrow, have a listen to that video and see it was really different stuff that came out. So let's have a look. So if we go to the book, we can see that there's a brown streak on cedarwood, and that tells us it's the woods. So we find the woods. Slowly but surely we find the woods. At the back. Okay, so I'm going to use the other cards just to cover up the other pages, because you know what? Sooner or later you're going to have to pay me for something. So, Cedarwood Virginian. Actually, I'll show you this, but I'll read it to you because I'm hoping that it doesn't turn back to front on you, but it may well do. So, Cedarwood Virginian says, hold strong. Don't be swayed by the winds of change around you. Stand tall. Resist the temptation to listen as the naysayers surround you. Keep focused on the job you have in hand. Remain strategic. Don't veer from tactics you've planned. Listen intently to information on the breeze. Remain determined. Your courage is what makes me pleased. Hold strong. Don't be swayed by the winds of change around you. Stand tall. Resist the temptation to listen as the naysayers surround you. Keep focused on the job you have in hand. Remain strategic. Don't veer from tactics you've planned. Listen intently to information on the breeze. Remain determined. Your courage is what makes me pleased. And I'd forgotten, I stopped halfway through because I'd forgotten this is the only one that went like a round. It kept repeating and repeating and repeating and repeating. And that taps in beautifully to the determination, doesn't it? I'm keeping on reminding you. I'm keeping on reminding you. I'm keeping on reminding you. So, and actually, definitely watch the video on Cedarwood Virginian, because you'll see just how spooky that is when you see the meditation work I did. Now, you'll also see on here at the bottom of the page, there's the energetics. Now, we're not going to talk about these energetics at all in the video. You might want to go and buy our knowledge base. Now, the knowledge base is completely based on this, and it is a set of lessons on each of the aspects. So middle to base, you're going to hear about that today when Gergely does his blending. So that's there. It also vibrates on the throat chakra. So what does that mean? Within the knowledge base, there is a complete set of information about the different chakras. We do as a lecture on each different chakra, how it affects on the emotional body, how it affects the physical body, how it affects the mental and spiritual bodies, and how that's working. So when we're looking at the knowledge base, this information here describes how the energies move through the system. What energy shift has taken place that we are getting these different physical problems and mental issues. So we can see that cedarwood Virginian operates on the water element and the earth element. And again, in the knowledge base, there's a complete section about, we talk about the about half an hour about the water element, then again about half an hour for the earth element, metal, fire, and whatever the other one is, gone out of my head. And then here we can see Sagittarius. Now, so that tells us that what planetary rulership it comes under. This is medical astrology, and this is actually how I see the different energetics playing out. Some people see it through the Ayurvedic, some people see it through Chinese medicine. This is always the lens I see it through. And usually we'll talk about how it's ruled by the moon or the sun or Saturn and the different trends that we see out. And when we look at an archetype like that, it's like Jade Shoots always says, it's like a metaphor, and that's a great analogy of how you can see the thread playing out right across the medicine. And so you can see that cedarwood Virginian is Sagittarius. So in the knowledge base, we talk about the different signs and planets and also the different houses. If I remember right, Angelica, for example, falls under the Pisces Aries cusp. So that's really quite a difficult one to understand. There's a whole lesson about the Pisces Aries cusp. And then again, Chinese medicine, it nourishes yin. What does that mean? What does it mean? It calms Shen. Shen is an interesting phenomenon all in its own right. It's the consciousness, our mental faculties, our imagination, our emotions, God with a small g, God with a big G. All of those aspects is a complete lesson about Shen and how the essential oils can affect it and change that to move the energy. And then we can see increases Pitta, reduces Vata, balances Kapha. So it's interesting, actually. I do know at the moment all of my oils tend to come out with earth energy. It's quite interesting hearing me do the earth energy lecture because it's entirely about the challenges I am facing at the moment. But if you are somebody who sells essential oils and you're looking for a way in all of the time, right? You're talking to the person at the school gate, for example, and you can see, she seems a healthy girl, to be honest. She's loving her kids, she seems happy. Imagine somebody who's got a really sing-song voice all the time. Oh, my darling, how did you get on today? Was it lovely? I know. And then child walks off. How are you? To everybody. If that sing-song voice never quite relents, then you can imagine that there's an earth energy imbalance. So any oils that fall under earth energy are good ones to sell. So yeah, if you are interested in learning more about that, ways in, just kind of being able to see, talking to somebody, what might be clues of what's going on of that energetic shift, then head over the knowledge base to have a look at that. So what was our next card? It was Rose, wasn't it? Queen of Roses, as you know. I do love my roses. Let's have a look. So the flowers, I think, are at the front of the book, if I remember rightly. Beautiful pink. Oh, both flowers, aren't they? So rose, rose, rose. Damask Rose. I was thinking we'd miss Rose out, but it's not under Duff for Rose. It's under, sorry, it's not Rough for Rose, it's Duff for Damask Rose. I remember writing this one, actually. This is quite sad. So it says, standing by your graveside or sobbing into your pillow, I know your pain. On the days when you feel lonely, worried or sad, I know your pain. Through the nights where sleep seems far away and you feel like you might break, amidst the anger, the confusion and desolation, I feel your pain. For I was there, remember, when you smelled the roses of their love as your fingertips stroked my petals and tried to avoid the prick of thorn. I felt your hopes, your fears, your joy of deep connection. I ensnared it in my scent to help conjure that affection. In my fragrance, remember hope. Let my aroma you complete. May scent of celebration heal you, calm you and help you sleep. For through me you are never alone, always loved and open to give and receive more. Smell me, open up and feel safe to feel love once more. Now I anticipate that these will be different for everybody, but that's entirely my dad talking to me. I feel quite choked up reading that, actually. When he died, he gave me a rose bush. My cousin works for a rose bush company, David Austin Roses. I'm sure you've heard of them. He's quite a senior manager there, and Dad arranged for a rose called Noble Anthony to be given to me and my sisters at the funeral. So I go and sit and talk to the rose bush. That's a great reminder that my dad's with me today. So that actually, Dad, that really helps. Thank you. So let's have a look at the energetics. We can see middle heart chakra, obviously. Water. Now, again, as I say, in the knowledge base, there is a much bigger lecture on water. But the energy of water is how it can flow around any obstacle and find a way to fill the space. So that's great. That's lovely. And Venus is obviously the planet of love, but there's lots more to do with beauty and money, actually. It's an interesting lecture on Venus. I like talking about Venus. Balance is Vata, Pitta and Kapha. If you don't know, Vata is very drying, Pitta is hot and fiery and moist, and Kapha is sluggish. So it brings it all into alignment. But in the knowledge base, as I say, different lectures on each of those. So it nourishes the blood. Well, I've got funny blood, actually, so that's useful to know, Dad. Thank you. Yin and essence. So yin is the feminine aspect. It's very gentle and passive and receptive, and it harmonizes the heart and Shen. We just talked about Shen. So we're going to put all these in a blend in a minute. And so last but not least, the cards have told me that I should go for lavender, which I guess is probably just over the page. Still in the pinks, as you can see. Oh, I remember this one too. Cover them up, cover them up. Can you see? There we go. Lavender's blue, dilly dilly, lavender's green. When you breathe me, dilly dilly, softly you dream. Anger and grief, dilly dilly, softly drift by. Worries and hurts, dilly dilly, kiss them goodbye. When you feel tense, dilly dilly, look for the bees. See how they buzz, dilly dilly, resting with ease. Learn from their hum, dilly dilly, for they all know. Learning to rest, dilly dilly, helps you to grow. Breathe in the scent, dilly dilly, lavender's light. Calm your stressed mind, honey, honey, surrender the fight. Release cares and worries, dilly dilly, I help you to see. Life is so good, dilly dilly, just let it be. Okay, I'm going to let them flow, not force them. This helps, this really helps, you know. I've got to tell you, when I was helping Gergley do this, he was sending me his notes, and every time they came across it, I was like, oh my goodness, I've got to do the cards. These are really hard. Didn't like my poems at all. Really found them difficult to do, and really, I just wanted to be writing my Melissa book, which I kind of still do, but I'm feeling a bit happier. Now I've got the cards in my hands and I can see them because they really help. Honestly, they really, really help. So, and of course I might be biased because it's my words talking back to me, but hearing the plant and seeing it written down, it's very, very helpful. So, actually, I've probably skipped the most valuable part of the process for speed. But when you turn out your cards, if you have got the oils, I would sit and breathe the oil as you read the poem. And that's very difficult to do on this camera like this, but because then you will really hear, you'll have that connection with the plant. It will open it up to you. So top to middle note, as I say, Glay's going to talk to us about the blending. Water, we've just talked about how that finds ways, effortlessly finds gaps to do things, doesn't force it, just gets around any obstacle. Heart chakra again. Mercury, communication, data, information. Yeah, that's very mercurial medicine. We'll talk about that. I know there's a very interesting lecture about Mercury. I originally wrote the Mercury ropes for the pain practitioner program. And so these are quite detailed lectures, about half an hour long, the medical astrology ones, because of course that's my passion. Neutral to cool is the action. Yeah, cooling like the roses. Activates chi. Now again, we'll talk about chi in the knowledge base, but basically it's the life force. You know how we said we talked about Shen? Well, if Shen doesn't have adequate chi forcing it through, then it becomes disrupted. And I always think about it feeling like you're treading water. So the activation of chi calms Shen or nourishes Shen or raises Shen, depending on which essential oil it is. It aggravates Vata. So yes, this is one of my favourite nags. So the world tells you to put lavender essential oil into every massage oil, into your moisturiser, into your bath. So it aggravates Vata. People, it will dry you out. That is how you get dry skin. Aggravates Vata, makes you a bit vapid, a bit dreamy. So all of the time you're like, you know, like the dreamers that wander around on a cloud. If you're not careful, too much lavender makes you that. Pacifies Kapha, so it stops you feeling sluggish, stops you feeling heavy. It's not really directly indicated for constipation, but that shift of energy through Kapha would release not only constipation, but congestion in the sinuses. And pacifies Pitta. Well, Pitta is hot, so it's calming. It reduces inflammation. Anything that's red, hot, angry, it'll calm it down. So there we go. So first, I've got my smelly stick. And really, this is only because then I can stick it down my top and you won't be able to see it. So we could use aroma pendants, we could use massage oil, sniffy sticks, whatever. This is just what works for me, and that's the most important thing, that it's the thing that works for you. So cedarwood Virginian is a fast oil, if I remember rightly. So this is quite a thin distillation. Ooh. And then we'll mop up everything off the table. Dip it up, wipe it up. Oh, so beautiful, it's smoky. It's beautiful, and I can tell you the lecture is about tapping into your ancestral line, and given that my ancestral line is full of wizards and witches, that's very helpful. Lots of plant healers coming to my aid. So a bit of lavender. Warm the bottle. You'll notice I cover the thing. It's not because I'm covering the labels, although it's because I can't be bothered going, don't ask me which oils I use, but it's more because it's very cold in this shed, so things get stiff, especially myrrh. Goodness me, when we come to do the myrrh video, I have to warm it up 3 weeks before. And then beautiful rose, Look at the colour of that. Beautiful. It's my favourite bit, you know, was it waiting for it to come out, just seeing the colour. Have I got the nerve to let it drop? I have. Go on, mix, 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 blend. You know, whenever I try and do videos, I always want to have the image of oils mixing, and it nobody ever quite videos that effectively. I think it would be beautiful. Look at that. Oh my goodness, that is sheer heaven. Just beautiful. So yeah, if you obviously want to buy the cards, there's a link underneath that tells you where to get them from. But also, if you want to use the knowledge base, there's a link through to that too. And goodness me, when you start to smell that and you feel all the knowledge base opening up all the different shifts in the body and how they move and how they're executing through the physical body, it's really extraordinary. It's a whole new layer to plant medicine. So there we go. That is how to do the blending. Can't wait for you to watch Gerglo talk about proper blending in a minute.
Hello, this is Gergely, and we are back in shooting little videos in our recipe hub and also about our oils in tongue of the trees videos. So this is my blending part video on rose. And let me start as usual with the card, with our card rose. And I think it's a beautiful illustration. And then guess what? This is actually about damask rose, because we have billions of roses, all sorts of different roses, many different species and many different colors. And well, you know, see that? This is blue. I'm in blue. And I actually just realized that I actually could have dressed in red to meet the color code for rose, but I could have just dressed in yellow or whatever, but I just forgot. So sorry about that. And what I'm, first of all, in aromatherapy, just as a side note, We use rose essential oil, and in perfumery you could use a rose absolute as well. So most of the aromatherapists, they say that we don't use absolutes because they might actually contain little bits of remnants of the organic solvents they use for the rose absolute extraction. So if you are looking at the essential oil of rose, what we use in aromatherapy is basically we use two different types. One is the damask rose, which the Latin name is Rosa damascena, and the other one is Moroccan rose, which actually is a little bit different in the composition of the aroma. It's just as beautiful as damask rose, and the Latin name for the Moroccan rose, what we call in the common name Moroccan rose, is Rosa centifolia, which means 100 leaves. Because, and if you have seen, you know, the damask rose or even the Rosa centifolia, it has many different small leaves. You know, it's really like stuffed together, as you can see. When they open up, it's just like a big, sort of like big flower head. And it's wonderfully scented. So the essential oil we are talking about, then it is actually produced by steam distillation, or rather actually a hydrodistillation in many cases, or most of the cases when you are talking about like big stills. You can use steam distillation, but it's really not an economic way to get the essential oil out of the rose buds and the rose heads. Because what happens with steam distillation is that you put all the rose petals in the column of the still, and as the steam goes through the plant material, it actually sort of like makes the petals stick together, and then it makes it less economic to get the oil out, so it takes more energy, it's slower, and the yield is not so big. So what they use is really a hydrodistillation. So, and then I'm going to show you pictures now. As you can see, the first picture, these are the beautiful roses. And this actually, this picture and the other two pictures that I'm going to show you now were taken in Bulgaria. When once I went down with a friend, Bulgarian friend, to the Valley of Roses. She knew someone there. And this was at the end of the rose season, as they say, which is usually the beginning of May, mid-May, depending on the weather. So we visited this plant, and then what I could see, it was just the rose fields next to the plants, the whole complex. There are many farms in the Rose Valley, and they all produce, most of them are organic now, and they all produce essential oils from Rosa damascena. And also there's one species they call Rosa alba, which is white rose. And it has just quite a different and a really exquisite aroma. It is, though, very, very expensive. So I was talking about hydrodistillation. And now in this picture, you can see a man with the stills, and then just packing the stills with sacks of big bags of roses that the pickers bring from the fields early in the morning, and they take it to the stills, and then they fill these huge stills with the rose petals, and it's just like sacks and sacks and sacks of rose petals. In fact, a couple of numbers: 1 kilo of essential oil, which is roughly, let's say, like 1 liter of essential oil, rose essential oil, needs about 4,000 kilos. So that's actually a ton, 4 tons of rose petals. So if you break it down, then it takes about 30 rose blossoms to get 1 drop of essential oil. Well, that makes it really expensive. So if I'm talking about the blending part with rose, I should say that when I started aromatherapy, and then in a couple of years I had money, and I actually dared to use rose, because it is very expensive compared to all the other essential oils. So I'm just looking up the internet now and then say that one site, which is a reliable brand that I'm thinking of, and without making any marketing for anybody, I see that 2.5 ml of Bulgarian rose oil costs about $90. Right, ooh, that's a lot. And 2.5 milliliters, if I'm just roughly calculating with 20 drops in each milliliter, that's not so many drops for that much money. So I was always wondering how to blend well, and I was really careful from the very beginning. Because, I mean, like when you're blending, you're playing. And if you make a mistake, you wasted a lot of money. So as I always told you, when you blend, the most important thing and the most important aspect is carefully designing your blends, right? Calculating all the drops, calculating the proportions. So when you go more into blending later on, when you know more about blending, and then you practiced enough, then you can be more confident in using rose as well as an essential oil. Of course, you can smell a rose anytime, there's it's a beautiful smell. Actually, this is Rose Absolute, which I almost like as much as I like rose essential oil. Let's describe the aroma of rose, which is really difficult. Because what would you say? How does rose smell, right? Rose smells like rosy. And it's very easy to describe. But apart from the joke, I could actually describe it as very sweet. You could describe it as very floral. You could describe it a little bit green or a little bit herbaceous. Sometimes it has earthy notes in it. But just in general, to describe rose essential oil as the aroma, I could just say rosy, and it stands for itself. Because it's a very expensive oil, there's a lot of adulteration goes on, because the more expensive an essential oil, the more they adulterate it, because there's lots of money in it. So be careful, always look for your right source and reliable source and look after that. Sometimes there are many flags that you can raise, if rose essential oil you can buy for 5 milliliters for $10, that actually is a red flag about rose. It should be more expensive. Well, think about rosy. What does it mean? How can you describe rosy as an aroma? It is really difficult because it is a really complex scent. Now, many sources, if you look it up on the internet and then you look for all sorts of different information, you find that many sources actually describe rose as an essential oil, the essential oil, having over 500 components minimum. But some sources actually list over 800. And they say that, they discover more and more components of the oil. And obviously, some of them are minute ones, and then also like trace elements. And that gives the complexity of the rose. Well, if you walk into a drugstore or a convenience store, and then you want to pick up anything from the shelves, like, I don't know, a hand soap or a detergent or an air freshener or many other things, then actually you smell it and then you say, well, it smells rose, right? And to most of the people who are not experienced in smelling roses or have never met with a real genuine rose essential oil, then you smell something and then you could say it smells rose. Well, many other essential oils smell rosy, right? Geranium, palmarosa, and a couple of other ones. And the reason is because there are, I think you could round it down to 3 main components of rose oil that gives you the rose scent. So, if you just think about geranium oil, there's rose geranium, which is a special variation, and it really smells rosy. So, in many cases, a lot of people around the world actually adulterate rose, just making up a chemical composition of the 3 main components. And then for the layperson, it smells rose, and then you could sell it. So, be careful and not to get cheated, right? So let's go to what it blends well with. Well, I started playing around with other florals, such as jasmine. Then you could add magnolia or neroli, or you could use more geranium. But why use geranium when you have the genuine rose? Then you can use a very exquisite, a very kind of rare essential oil, which is called Damiana as well. But you could also use lavender, it's classic combination, and also ylang ylang. And it blends well with many of the citrus oils. Like one of my favorites is rose and yuzu, citrus unos, which is pretty much like a Japanese citrus oil. Not cheap either, but it gives just like a very unusual combination. I mean, like in a good way. But you could actually mix it with or blend it with lime or bergamot is absolutely a number one. But it also blends well with other oils like Roman chamomile. Sometimes it blends well with some of the spicy oils like clove bud. Also some of the herbals like helichrysum. And I could list like petitgrain, for example. That's a great oil to blend with rose with. And also some of the woodies like sandalwood. That's just like another beautiful combination. Also blends well with vetiver. That's just very deep. It's just vetiver and rose is a very interesting combination because it's sort of like, like the flower, the floral with the smoky kind of darker shades of the essential oils. Or also patchouli, also rose patchouli, classic combination. And a very interesting combination is tobacco. Well, tobacco is not an essential oil per se. It is solvent extracted, so tobacco absolute you find, and you can blend it with rose. That gives you somehow like this mysterious, darker, also kind of feminine but masculine at the same time. Very interesting combination. One interesting thing about rose essential oil is because if it's well produced and it's genuine, it contains, as many other essential oils as well, contains waxes. That makes it it's very unique because at room temperature even, if you look at a bottle of rose essential oil, it might actually solidify. So there's a little magic that you can do is that if it solidifies and you want to play this little trick with your friends or with your clients, then you see and show them, well, this is solid, you can open it up and then it doesn't come out. So then what you do is that you hold it in your hands and warm it up, and then you say you played magic. And then, in like half a minute or in a minute from the warmth of your hands, you can actually see that it actually becomes liquid as well. Just a little trick, to play, whatever. So if I'm looking at the therapeutic properties that Liz is going to cover, and it's just like rose on the final words is a very, very cultural flower. It's a very cultural floral that you find in literature. In fact, actually, I looked it up in Amazon, and I just put in the keyword rose, and it brought me up the first 20 out of 60,000 entries that are related to rose. Of course, not all of them are books, but many different products. So rose is something that humankind was actually living with for thousands of years, and it just really entered our main cultural heritage. And nowadays we also use very much rose everywhere in our love life, for our loved ones, for the weddings, for name it. There's like an endless list where you could actually add rose. Safety. Rose is not recommended into the two-thirds, let's say into the 2/3 of pregnancy. Other than that, actually, because mainly rose is used in many cosmetics, so it's really safe for the skin because it's healing for the skin. But let's say the main concern would be that try to avoid it in well, until the second half of pregnancy. Other than that, I don't think that there's any kind of concern. And just to finish this video with a poetic question, who wouldn't like roses, right? So if you like my video on rose, then come back for the next ones. And until that, as I always say, happy blending, folks.
You get your phone, you turn it this way up, and then there's a little red subscribe button. Turn it grey by clicking it, and then there's a little bell. Click that and press all at the bottom of your phone or tablet or computer. It'll say you will receive all notifications, and then there's a little hand with a thumbs up. Click that, it'll turn it blue and it says added to your liked videos, and there will be comments, and if you want to you can send a comment and say like hi's to Mum and Gergely, and then the link to the next video will be in the description below underneath the video. So bye.